Wow, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? Good evening. Can somebody hear me?
Hi, Prof, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yes, we can hear you as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks a lot. We unfortunately today, ESCOM has again done what ESCOM is known for. And there are a few people who are load-shedded. Others will join us late. Others are load-shedded right now. Others will be, obviously, will be kicked out while we are in the session. So please do understand, ladies and gentlemen, but let me welcome all of you for today's session. We are going to have a lovely session again tonight, as usual. My name is Mazwe Majola. We will be welcoming and we will be introducing the speaker shortly, but I just want to welcome all of you. I can see most of you are here, and as I'm saying that, others will be joining us later. Others are disturbed by the load shedding, but how wonderful it is to be with you today, all of you. You are so welcome, and thank you so much for joining in. We are a leadership platform. We meet every Wednesdays at 6 p.m. We started meeting during the COVID, actually. We started meeting during the COVID. It was in August 2020. And then we have been meeting since then every day. We have been meeting, or rather every Wednesday, we have been meeting, and I would like to welcome our regulars and our members. I can see many of you. We are not going to mention you by name because of time constraint. We've got tight time constraint tonight because we really want to give time to Prof. Kupe, and I can see he's here with us already. We are so excited that he's here. As I've said, that I'll be indeed welcoming him and introducing him shortly. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are here as leaders, as scholars from different universities all over the world. We meet every Wednesdays, as I'm saying, discussing leadership issues, because we realize that leadership is everything, and everything is leadership, as we always say here. Without leadership, I mean, our families, our companies, our businesses, our institutions will go down. That is why we are here every Wednesdays as scholars and as leaders, community leaders, business leaders, politicians, members of the media, all professionals or professionals from all walks of life are here every Wednesdays at 6 p.m. to discuss leadership. And we are so happy that tonight we are hosting our esteemed guest, Professor Kupe, and they will be taking us, or will be discussing about the future of the higher education in the era of pandemics and disruptions. I don't want to waste any time really today, and I've got a very impressive CV of Prof. Kupe, and I know that all of us, we know him And because as I've said that, I would really love to give him more time. So I don't want to waste any time, and I want just to go straight to him. He will be taking us. So what's going to happen is that he will give us his talk. He will move us, going to empower us, he's going to inspire us. And then once he has finished, obviously we'll engage him as we always do. We'll enter into a conversation, we'll ask him questions, and then we'll answer. And then also, obviously, we will engage each other. We are all leaders here. So whenever we meet, I always say, I respect each and every person who's here, because knowing you, really, I always say I'm humbled that people of your caliber always come to these sessions every Wednesdays. We are discussing the future of higher education in the era of disruptions and pandemics. And our speaker is the Vice-Chancellor and the Principal of the University of Pretoria, a well-known scholar and a well-known leader. He has turned this institution around, and I'm happy because I'm one of those people who studied there. And it's so wonderful when you when you're talking about University of Pretoria. I did one of my master's degree at the University of Pretoria, so it's a university I respect a lot. I see so many people as well who have studied there. I see I see Dr. Sfiso Ngobo studied there as well, and then many of you who studied in this wonderful institution. So, ladies and gentlemen, a special welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. If it's your first time joining us, please feel at home. This is a safe space. You are in the midst of scholars and in the midst of leaders. So please express yourself. Don't hold back. Don't be diffident. Don't be shy. Don't say, no, it's my first day, so I just want to hear what others are saying. No, we want to hear from you as well. There is a very good reason why you have joined us. So we're here to learn from each other as leaders. We are here to empower each other. We always say that we are here to learn and to unlearn and to relearn, because leadership is a journey. It's not a destination. We always rise and fall, and we always learn from each other. Prof. Kupe, I know that, as you have mentioned to me, you are having a time constraint. So as I'm saying that, please, I would like to apologize to you that I'm not going to read your long CV, but as I've said, really everyone who's here, the reason why there's so many people are here, because we know you. So, and then we are so looking forward to hear from you, Prof. Prof, here in this platform, we've got scholars, as I'm saying, from different universities, locally and abroad. And we've got leaders, as I'm saying as well, tuned in from locally and international as well, from all over the place, actually. And we're here to hear from you. We appreciate you, we respect you, and personally, I would like to thank you so much for availing yourself in the midst of your busy schedule. I know you've got a tight schedule, but thank you so much for humbling yourself and say, no, you will come and address us. And thank you so much, my brother. And I would like to give you the platform now. Please empower us, Prof. Kupe. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Prof. Mazwe. I'm humbled to be in the presence of people that are here. I see very top scholars sitting in this platform. I won't mention them by name, but one of them is smiling. So you are one of those that I'm referring to, people who have trail-based before all of us who are still learning. Really, to be speaking, when we talk about these topics and when we talk about education in Africa, higher education, one must actually understand that one is talking about a very long and very difficult history. Some people might even ask, do we have actually African universities? And are the disruptions and pandemics you are talking about not just simply manifestations of what is happening now and not a part of a long history? I would like to situate myself historically and contextually in the troubled nature of the kinds of institutions we inherited, all the way going back to how slavery, colonialism, imperialism, apartheid shaped our societies. And also situate myself in the context of saying that one could ask the question how far we've transformed, changed these institutions to serve the interests that we want for the kind of Africa or South Africa, if you want to be nationally specific, that we actually want. One would not be wrong to say we still have some way to go, and that some of those things that characterize the crisis, not just of our education, but of our societies, also, if you like, multiply, accentuate the effects of pandemics and the disruptions that we face. So my talk today is also, if you like, a musing about the quest for a kind of university that will be contextually relevant, appropriate and impactful to create the kind of African society we like that takes its place among global communities, but is connected and is engaged with other global communities, if you like. So allow me, you will find therefore that my thoughts here are not necessarily as coherent as some of the more esteemed speakers you have heard before me, and that I'm thinking aloud while sitting with you on this platform. Allow me to start, as I said, albeit in the present, which could be misleading, but also evoking the past, which is often much more insightful. I think we live in a world of multiple ongoing disruptions and pandemics that actually require bold, visionary, ethical, innovative, and transformative leadership that places the sustainability of humanity, and not only in South Africa and Africa, but the sustainability of humanity globally across the world, living in harmony with nature on our planet. Remember that actually we face the multiple ongoing disruptions and pandemics are also planetary in nature, and I'll talk about this in a little short while. This period requires a leadership able to see and grasp the opportunities in the crises in order to envision better societies and a better world. And such leadership also needs to have the necessary historical knowledge, if you like. See how these institutions have evolved over time, what forces have shaped them, what opportunities have been lost in the past, what opportunities can actually be grabbed in the present. The COVID pandemic caused by the coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 is unique that it is global in nature. It is not like, for example, Ebola, which affected only certain regions and countries in Africa. Its severity caused a near total closure of everything in the world as we have known it, including the higher education systems in our society and across the world. We're still grappling with those effects as you speak. Every day, when I finish here, I'm going to a crisis meeting about how do we take advantage of the situation that appears to have opened up to restore education to what it is, not sitting behind a computer, just calling it online learning and teaching, actually interacting as humans, trying to produce knowledge and impart knowledge. Because the situation we have now is posed by the crisis of the pandemic. But we know that education is social. It is not only that which you can receive through technology sitting alone. And so that is why, social distancing can be a strange thing in an educational context, because the very nature of education requires social engagement in order to shape society, if you like. It has not been short-lived as we wished when it was declared a pandemic in or about March 2020. We are in the third year of its existence and still face its continuous flare-ups that bring almost everything to a near halt. Its full effects on human life, on politics, the economy, social life, and education will be felt for many decades to come. The expression before COVID, during COVID, and quote-unquote after COVID is quickly becoming common. But do we know when it will be after COVID? Scientists tell me that what we must learn to do is to live with COVID, and that it will downgrade from a pandemic to being more like an epidemic or even just being endemic like severe seasonal flus. It is important, though, not to lose sight of the fact that at the point COVID struck the world was facing other disruptions that were both a threat to humanity, but some of which were new opportunities that could create a better life in many respects, some of which I will touch upon. The world was facing a deficit of future-oriented and future-focused leadership that could see multiple opportunities in the multiple ongoing disruptions that were present before the pandemic itself. And also, if you take a historical perspective to this, ongoing disruptions and pandemics are not new. We've been with them for a little while. So the Corona-19 pandemic, it's a health crisis in its own right, but a crisis that unleashed, as I said earlier, multiple other crises affecting the whole world. And was a wake-up call about the way we were and are living on our planet. I'll return to this point perhaps a little later, and also to talk about what it taught us. So for me, the COVID pandemic is literal in the sense that it's happening literally, we feel it, it's affecting us, and also, but it's also symbolic. It said to us, you have been living in pandemics, some of which you have never really addressed over a long period of time. Now everything has come to the fore. In this regard, I prefer to characterize the period before COVID and now during COVID as a period, as I say, of continuous multiple ongoing disruptions that are changing the world and human life as we have known it. Some things will never be the same again. Some things have been exacerbated, which have been the same for a while, and we are not yet getting rid of. After COVID passes or becomes an endemic, there will be no return to certain things. And hopefully we have learned our lessons and provide better leadership. What are the disruptions that characterize this period, but have a long history? Across the whole world, I would say, continuing, including countries of the industrialized North. For example, the US and the UK being examples of so-called developing countries and industrialized countries. They were facing also economic crises of various kinds, and the distrust and faith in institutions and politics are rising from a belief by people that political systems, economic systems were not actually catering for the large majority of the people, that inequalities, poverty, and unemployment were continuing in ways that did not actually address the needs of the rest of the public. You can translate that into those kinds of societies which have been affected by the trajectories of imperialist politics, been affected by colonialism and by apartheid. And in that context also, what was arising was the kinds of leadership that are often not responsive to the needs of the large majority of the people. So you find racial, gender, class, and related divisions. And that the education system, particularly the higher education system, was being affected as well, in that it was not necessarily able to address the schisms and the conflicts and the divisions and the lack of social cohesion in those kinds of societies. And that for us in where we've somewhat transplanted institutions, it was also then these kinds of economic, political, institutional crises were exacerbating sometimes a lack of relevance and the lack of impact. And that is why at various points in our societies, there have been debates around, for example, questions of curriculum transformation, decolonization of the curriculum, and also a more relevant education system that speaks to our contextual realities. So around the world, if you like, also, we found that these disruptions and pandemics, some political, some social, not just health, not just affecting the health area, were breeding narrow forms of nationalism, ethnic chauvinism, Afrophobia, that is the hatred of of other Africans within African countries, xenophobia, the hatred of foreigners, and also bringing forth politicians who like diversionary politics that does not address fundamental issues. And I think that's also a very often a sign of lack of leadership. So so if you like, you can take this further into the cultural, into the religious sphere and so on. Second, I think that, as I said, the political crisis and the lack of people feeling that they are underrepresented, and the divisions between the global north and the global south, and within the global south and the global north, created a kind of society. Then actually one wishes often that knowledge and education would ensure that people desist from taking those directions. I would say another a crisis and pandemic is that the world was and is facing an unprecedented environmental, ecological, and climate crisis that has multiple effects, including on livelihoods, incomes, and causing major disasters hitherto unseen: floods, fires, droughts, diseases, and dare I say, disease pandemics. Well, we are all aware now that the climate and the situation of, for example, local agriculture, rural agriculture in our communities, which are themselves often created by apartheid spatial allocation, are no longer what they used to be, affecting food, nutrition, increasing poverty, and so on. And that necessarily educational institutions have yet to come up with the kind of strategies and forms of knowledge that can empower our communities to be resilient to these unfolding ecological, environmental, and climate disasters. Then, of course, fourth, I think something that is very common, we all know, and is symptomized by how we are meeting here today in this forum. The rapid changes in technology, especially the emergence of digital technologies, disrupting business models, disrupting multiple sectors, including education itself, creating also new opportunities, but also compounding certain inequalities. We know that during the coronavirus, what has happened though, despite the multiple potential of the technology to be, is that lack of access to these technologies, their cost and their distribution in society, has resulted in increasing inequalities as well. So that for those with those technologies and access to it, it has actually given them competitive advantage after historical advantages and opportunities. But that actually, if all things being equal, if you like, if leadership could design policies that enable equity and equality and access to all forms of social and economic power, these technologies will be huge liberating tools that would enable people to take advantage of the new unfolding world that has been created by rapidly advancing technological developments, if you like. So the rise of robots, the rise of digital network systems and networks, the huge stores of knowledge and libraries that are now digitized. All of that without the access, in a sense, actually does not create the kind of society that you want. I could say more and enthuse more about this, but I think that in a sense you get the point. So, what is the future of higher education in this context? I think that I could say that one can say there are multiple silver linings, although we must have the kind of reality check that I was talking about. First, I think that if these technologies were accessible to everybody, our ambition, especially in Africa, to extend access to education could be achieved in a much shorter time than we could using simply brick and mortar forms of access. If you like, the notion of distance education could be more. But if, of course, this kind of education was coupled together or blended with contact education, because as I said earlier on, education is not merely accessing information through, it is an interaction, it is an engagement, it is a dialogue, it is a debate, and also through engaging with others in the educational enterprise, in knowledge building, can you then become an educated and skilled person ready for an evolving world. So that I think that is very, very important in that regard, to realize that there is we're sitting in the front of we're sitting in front of huge opportunity, but we lack the means to actually translate that opportunity to that. So we need a leadership that is technologically and information literate, but able to, if you like, articulate economic policies, social policies, with an ability for every citizen and every member of society, if you like, to be able to take advantage of these opportunities. I lead an institution, if you like, where at least the students there and the staff there are enabled, and also through some of their own efforts, to have access to these digital and technological networks. And I could see how we have been able to survive and to some extent thrive through this constrained period. But I can also see what we have lost and what we want to regain. So going forward, and we believe it's not just for the University of Pretoria, the future of education is blended or hybrid teaching and learning methodologies that combine people sitting in class, contact education as we know it, but people also being online before, during, and after class, and also some courses being taught online and offline, some program, but depending on how, if a person has navigated the curriculum, if you like. So the future of teaching and learning could actually be creative and very exciting. Equally, the future of research. For so many times, and I think that is why we face so many crises and pandemics in our African context, our research agendas have not been aligned with the kinds of challenges we face as our societies. They've been, in a sense, dictated by, in a very abstract fashion, what is called global challenges. Because local challenges have a global manifestation. Climate change is not a South African issue only, it's a global issue, but it doesn't manifest the same way. So for example, researchers show that we would be most affected by climate change, despite that we are not the ones who cause most of climate change and environmental destruction. It's those that have caused destruction here before through colonialism and imperialism. So the future of higher education, I think, in South Africa and Africa is universities that seek contextual and societal relevance and impact. In other words, design their research agendas to address local issues. And also, in a sense, seek others. Do not see universities in the ivory tower as only producers of knowledge. Engage with other forms of knowledge, including indigenous forms of knowledge that perhaps have not been validated scientifically through the kind of knowledge system that is dominated by the North now. And I think we could have we could be much more successful that way, and not only just for ourselves, but for the rest of the world. Of course, the future of our education, we've seen it in this country, is an enduring issue, demographic transformation, transformation of the curriculum to be much more relevant, to be decolonized, to be less, not to be commodified. Both not just physical access to universities, but access also for those who do not have the economic means to participate in these situations. And also dealing with some of the traumas that have historically faced us and are in institutions, mental health and well-being, legacies of racism, sexism, and gender-based violence. So if you like, I think the future of the University of, the future of higher education in Africa must be contextualized in what has affected, what are the pandemics and disruptions taken the long history, and what are the opportunities created not only by technology, but new ways of thinking about social problems and new ways of reimagining, resetting, and repositioning universities, not to be ATMs for degrees, but also to be rather actually real knowledge institutions, in the sense that people are empowered to understand who they are, where they are, and what they ought to do in that context. As the moderator said at the beginning, universities to actually position themselves in the space of learning, unlearning, and relearning, and that actually being, if you like, the basis for the future. And let me end here. I think I could say too many things, but this is a dialogue and not a monologue. Let me end here by saying is that one of the disruptions that have occurred because of technologies, among other things, is the changing nature of the world of work and work of the future. So we here now, because of digital technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, all manner of technologies producing new realities, if you like, including virtual reality, that some jobs will disappear, some forms of work will disappear, some new forms of work will emerge. And that I think we need to then, even in that context, rethink what we teach, how we teach, and how we learn, and how and what learning actually means, because the world will not be the same. So what we've done at the University of Pretoria also is also to create a center for the future of work. After hosting the first Nobel Prize dialogue in Africa last year, where we had 5 Nobel Prize winners, what we want to do is that, what does the nature of the changing globe or the global world mean for South Africa and Africa? How do we turn ourselves into, active agents shaping our own lives? Because I ultimately believe that universities can be one of the agents and drivers of change to create the kind of African society with its own ethos, values, and morality to look after our honest people and to engage the rest of the world. I think I'll stop there, moderator.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Earlier on, I did say that ESCOM is a spoiler. ESCOM is jealous. ESCOM doesn't like good things, because, as I said, that we've got so many of our colleagues who are load-shedded, but we'll continue with whoever is here. And thank you so much, Prof, for empowering us. Ladies and gentlemen, I always say, I don't want to edit anyone's script. You heard, you have been here. This is a conversation. And now you are welcome to engage Prof. Kupe, or even engage each other on this topic of the future of higher education. I've seen that there's someone who's been busy there. Unfortunately, today, two people were supposed to handle the chat room for us. They are load-shedded, so we'll try ourselves. I've seen someone who's been quite busy there in the chat room, Sanjay Bana. Sanjay, would you like to ask your question here as the Prof, or would you like us to read your question, Sanjay?
Prof, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I'm actually out, and the signal here is quite bad, which is why I've typed it in the chat. Could you perhaps just read the questions out for me? Thank you.
Okay, we can hear you actually, but if you want us to read, we can read.
Yeah, I've read the question as well.
Sure. Maybe I'll just summarize it as follows. I think, firstly, thank you for opening this up to everybody, and Andre, thank you for the invite. I'm glad I'm here. I just, I've listened to what Prof says, and as he was speaking, I started feeling more and more overwhelmed, because every time you think about the future of education, there's more complexity and more issues and more problems, and it just compounds one on top of the other. So I'm a simple person. In the back of my mind, the simple question I'm asking myself is, well, is it about learning, or is it about upskilling people? We could learn the entire encyclopedia of Britannica, for those that remember those, but how much of that do we actually need to apply? And when I start thinking about the future of education, the future of learning, I'm very much drawn to, it's about the application of it. So should we be talking about the future of education and the future of learning, or should we be talking about the future of skills development and application of skill? And I'm not sure what is the right conversation there. I think that's the one point. The second question I want to raise is just, we talk about all the things that are disrupting the industries and that's disrupting education. But, here's the question. Why don't we just begin by just disrupting the entire education system to begin with? Instead of worrying about the disruption that's taking place, saying, well, how do we break this entire thing down and rebuild it into something completely new and different? So beginning within and saying, how do we self-disrupt learning and education and training? I'll stop there with those two. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Prof. Kupe?
Okay, thank you. I just also to inform you that ESCOM has also dealt me a blow. I'm using my reserve power. So if I go off, you know what has happened. So immediately after starting to speak, I was knocked off. So, but anyway, I think the questions he raises are very important. That is why, if you notice, I was talking about the future of work, not being just because skills, education, teaching and learning, whatever, all have an end, have an end goal, if you like. So we are on the same page when you say, why don't we disrupt that? Well, the thing is being disrupted anyway. For me, the question where leadership comes in is, out of this disruption, how do you create and innovate with the new? That is why I spoke several times about contextually relevant knowledge, things that are contextually ways of learning. I remember saying, what do we teach, what do we learn, and how do we learn? I think context matters. So in other words, we actually want to be problem solving. We want to be agents of change. We want to be creating our own world. Because so far what has happened is the education system and societies we live were shaped by forces that were very violent upon us. So recovering from that violence is actually also forging new tools to be able to create what we do. And for me, in the learning and skill, learning imparts particular kinds of skills, but I'm saying that must be dynamic and it must not be simply mimicking other society or imitating other societies, because the contextual realities and the philosophies are actually different. I mean, we got Prof. Gordon Zide here. He's written some of these things in a number of publications as he speak. You cannot divorce skilling, learning, knowledge, teaching from philosophical beliefs. And philosophical beliefs has a lot to do with what kind of society do you want to be and what are the drivers of that society. Now your history, your values, your ethos become very, very important. And in that space, you're also fighting certain things that if the knowledge is not liberatory, knowledge or skilling or learning can be a form of enslavement, actually.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thanks a lot. I see a hand there from Portia, and my brother there, Andre Young, has asked and proposed, which I totally agree. We've got Brother Bishnu Nipak is all the way from India. He's asking if maybe he can just share for us. So after Portia, Bishnu, can you please just share, and then we'll go back to Prof. Kupe. Portia, over to you.
Yeah, good evening. So I cannot really help myself. This is a topic quite close to my heart. So I think the question we need to ask ourselves as educators, why do we exist? And if we exist because we want to create employment, employability, entrepreneurship, then we need to say, so let's adopt a marketability approach as universities. How do we market ourselves in the space of employability? Then the second thing is, if we take an outside-in approach, then where are the jobs? And if it's employability, we cannot be the custodians alone to design toward that. So we need to then co-create and collaborate with not just ourselves as educators, but with business. So I think we need to ask ourselves, where are the jobs? Where are the jobs of the future? What does education look like? And then design from the outside in. That's my viewpoint.
Thank you. Thank you, Portia. Thanks a lot. Bishnu is joining us all the way from India. Bishnu, over to you.
Thanks very much. Happy to be part of the education ecosystem from South Africa. And it's my privilege, honestly, to be with people from the country, which I guess transformed the way Mahatma Gandhi thought. And I think the revolution is the whole, the Indian as a country as an ecosystem, right? So, okay, I heard Professor Kupe talking about, how pandemic has affected the education ecosystem. But I think I'll talk from the technology perspective. He did speak about technology and how technology can probably impact the way the learning is happening, right? I think the one thing which is very clear is about the digital transformation in education has gained momentum, and unfortunately, it has. I think the momentum has been gained because of the pandemic, which should not be otherwise. Which should be otherwise, right? And if you look at, I think the adoption of digital transformation, it has been happening, and it has been keeping in track in terms of how the technology has been evolving. But in terms of adoption, in terms of education, I think there was a lag of 4 years. Unfortunately, or we can say fortunately, COVID has given that headwind which is required, so that the adoption of digital transformation is happening. It will happen in education segment as well. Now, second thing which is very clear, our perspective is about from the students, right? There's a lot of, I think the expectation for the students has completely changed. I think there's a paradigm shift in terms of what students today need, right? From the education ecosystem, right? Because if you look at the students, they are really literally born digital, right? Like maybe few of us who are not born digital, but every student will have an access to mobile, will have an access to the digital, native, in terms of the framework. So therefore, the expectation of the students need to be matched with what the university, what the education institution is offering. Third is about, we're seeing a lot of competitiveness in terms of the education institution. So if they have to make the cut, if to need to make in terms of gain the competitive advantage, they have to adopt digitalization in every core, in everything what you do it, right? Now we have seen the advent of tech and how it is impacting the education space. Now, if you talk about the three main levers of education and how it can really transform the education ecosystem is about. Now, one is about the cloud and analytics, right? And then the mobility. I heard Professor Kupe talking about there is a digital divide, and you understand in India as well there is a digital divide. So, for example, right, approximately, right, 40% of a population do not have an access to the basic thing which is called internet, and we understand that as well. But today, if you look at the penetration of mobile phone has completely evolved. I think it has really changed the way the people are accessing the data, right? Now, can a technology be evolved around the mobility as a factor, right? So that every individual, every citizen in the country can access whatever they need. It could be content, it could be an assessment, it could be anything to complete the learning process, right? I think that's what we need to really keep it in mind, that are you adopting a technology which is mobile, which is mobile friendly, right? And I think we all live in the space of artificial intelligence, machine learning. I think what you need to really understand is how is it impacting? Is it impacting positively, or is it not impacting that much positively? So according to us, I think AI ML is going to transform the way the education is happening. It's not only learning, we're also talking about the way, for example, the learning outcome is measured by the artificial intelligence and machine learning. For example, today, the learning has become more personalized. For example, if I want to learn something, I will find my ways to learn in whatever sources I can find. But do I get the content which is specific to what I need? Maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no. But can artificial intelligence and machine learning can help me, or probably can aid me to give me the content which I require, which give me the content which I desire, give me the content which will probably help me upskill on the areas of my improvement, rather than giving me the content which probably I may have an idea, or probably I will never need it, right? And that's point number one. Second is about, I know you've been speaking about, yes, learning is important, definitely learning is important, right? But what about assessment, right? How would you measure the outcome of the learning, right? Because, if someone says that I've learned everything, but how do you ensure that he has learned? I think the application of the learning, I heard even Professor Kupe talking about, is about how about measuring the impact of the learning or the outcome of the learning, right? I think outcome of the learning can only be measured, which we understand is about by doing a proper assessment, right? Now, I think, if you talk about learning is more, I think we know today, for example, COVID has taught us to learning can happen, typically virtually, and it is happening virtually. But I also feel that sometimes it's a collaborativeness which also brings the best of the learning outcome, right? But if you talk about two different elements, one is the learning and second is about assessment. Assessment has always been personal, right? I need to assess myself, right? I don't want a community to give me assessment, right? And if that's the case, right, then can assessment be digitized, right? And there are many advantages of making assessment digitized. The one is about that the analytical capability of an assessment. Today, for example, if I take an assessment, I only get a result whether I'm pass or fail, right? Whether I've done well or not well. But can I give a micro level picture of the assessment outcome, right? And because that's going to help me, because if you talk about an assessment that could be centric around four chapters or 4 different subjects, right? Or 5 different topics. Maybe I'm good at one topic, maybe I'm not good in 3 topics, right? But it's not the outcome which talks about I have passed assessment or failed assessment is going to help me to improve myself. But if I get an analytical report talking about, Mr. Vishnu, you are good at, for example, it's a chapter A or a concept A or a content A, but you have to improve upon this, maybe content B, content C, content D, right? If I get the picture, definitely I will put in efforts to better myself, maybe the subsequent assessment, the subsequent test, right? Is that happening when it comes to an offline assessment? Maybe my answer is no, because offline assessment is only giving you a answer of yes and no, or maybe 1 and 0. But I think we need to get into the micro level picture of every assessment which you do. Okay, now there has been a concern in terms of can an assessment be done online? We understand the concern, because if it is a high-stake examinations, we need to ensure that the examinations are done in a cheat-proof manner. It was not possible before, but it has become possible. Again, I'm going to the topic about AI, ML, right? And AI ML has completely transformed the way the examination is happening today, right? Today, we could virtually have an assessment and can replicate the same level of rigor which otherwise could have been done in offline examinations. For example, we have AI is enabled something called object detection. AI has enabled something called a facial recognition, which means to ensure that if I am the candidate who's supposed to be taking the assessment, and there's no proxy, there's no possibility of proxy can happen because of the AI features. And that's what I'm talking about during the examinations. Even you talk about the pre-examinations process, right? How can, for example, an assessment tool, an online assessment tool, allow a student or a bona fide student to be allowed to take an assessment, right? It's like in a physical environment when a student walks in and someone has to check his bona fideness in terms of his identity and other things, right? Can the same thing be replicated on an online platform? And I think yes, because of that better technology, and specifically again talking about the artificial intelligence, it can happen that, okay, if I'm a candidate for the examinations, I can only be allowed, and I should only be allowed to take the assessment. And that's point number 1. The point number 2 is about the way I think we design a question bank, the way we talk about designing an assessment, right? It's not necessarily that the same questions need to be asked to this all student, because every student has a different IQ level, every student has a different application perspective, right? So can the question bank again use the intelligence to have a different set of questions for different set of people? And again, I'm talking about questions to be aligned to the intelligence of the people so that we get the best out of each individual.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vishnu.
I think I'm over. Yeah, thank you.
With respect, sorry about that. Yes, we really want to learn a lot from you, but given time constraint, and also, as I said, here in South Africa, because of load shedding, I can see we are losing people, obviously, probably because of load shedding. But I think if we've got to the gist of your comments and of your question. I see Andre's hands there, but probably let me give Prof. Kupe just to respond to these comments and questions, and then we'll go back to other guys or to other colleagues as well. Sorry, Prof. Kupe.
Yeah, so I think Portia, I think to start with what Portia said, the one thing I wanted to say, I fully agree with you, and also in my sort of my speech or remarks here was, I wanted to talk about this, what she said, the co-creation of skills and knowledge between universities and the various sectors of society, let me put it that way, where students will end up in gainful employment. Of course, I mean, I just want to say also that the purpose of education is not simply employability. It is also a broadening of the mind in order to be able to engage with the world. Part of that, of course, should be gaining skills that will lead to a livelihood. Now the co-creation becomes important. In other words, some things that we have lost in the past is students who want to become leaders to work in the public service should have internships with the public service. In the public service, students want to be engineers should go and have internships and learnerships in engineering companies, and some industries actually do that. What we do at the University of Pretoria to make sure there is a co-creation is to create boards of people who are actually in the sector, who sit down with us to review the curriculum to look at its relevance and whether it will impart the right skills. As you know, also our higher education sector is characterized by peer review of what you teach and how you teach, again, as a way of creating and ensuring that certain levels of standard, quality, relevance are actually within the curriculum and seek to produce graduates with certain attributes. Let me also end by saying that it's important also for us to produce skilled graduates who are socially sensitive and engaged and understand the society in which they work, to produce simply people who are brilliant in their skills, whether they are engineers or doctors, but have no values, ethos, and empathy with our communities and where they're going to work, is a miseducation, if you like. And there is a book, by the way, called The Miseducation of the Negro. And we do not want to repeat such. We want to produce citizens that are socially sensitive, socially conscious, socially engaged, and want to transform our societies. I mean, the comments by Bishnu are actually very interesting around, this is what I refer to as, we need a leadership that is digitally literate and information literate, because the digital space is now a major space for learning, education, knowledge gaining, and engagement. Again, here, let me caution, it is not just about the technology. The technology should be a means to an end, and means to an end for people to get to know, to improve their lives, and to have gainful skills and abilities if they like. And all of those things have to be taken through assessment modes. At the University of Pretoria, we no longer rely on one form of assessment method, for example. You know, the exam, the test, the essay. There are other forms of assessment that can holistically assess a person's abilities. And that really is getting an education.
Wow, thank you very much, Prof. Thank you. I will take my brother there, Andre, and after Andre, I see another hand. Andre will be followed by Dr. Ngobo, and I would also like to give Professor Zide after Dr. Ngobo, just to share some thoughts as well. In that order, please, Andre, after Andre, Dr. Ngobo, after Dr. Ngobo, Prof. Zide. Over to you, my brother, Andre.
Thank you, Professor Mazwe Majola. Professor Kupe, listening to you, I'm quite inspired. And what's clear to me is that the modernity of our nations and world has got to be managed in their evolution to this age of enlightenment, which I believe you, the intelligentsia, are responsible for. My question is, in terms of the efficacy of our efforts, our investments, specifically with the actors in the higher education space, what do you believe is lacking in our investment approach to trigger not just job creation, but to trigger better economics and better leadership, ethical leadership for the continent? Because I think that there's some key investments that we may have missed. And I'd like your your mind apply to what those might be? Thank you, Prof. Majola.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Mr. Young. Over to you, Dr. Ngobo.
Thank you, Prof. Majola. Thank you, Prof. Kupe, and esteemed guests who are actually here. Before my question, thank you, my Prof. I'm the UP alumni. Yeah. There's two things that I just want to bring in also, that in what you've raised, especially on the area of the digital world, for me is that the digital world or the world of technology, COVID, even if we had advanced educational policy, but the pandemic proved to us that there's a gap in relation to can be able to advance some of the proposals that you're also saying, you know, that it depends where you are, then you can be able to can have that free access, you know, because of insufficiency of access to technological support. But lastly, I know that this is a question that I want to throw in wisdom in this, that obviously as a country, South Africa, since 2010, there's been continuous postponement to migrate in terms of the technical. We have not done that. I mean, we've gone to ITU, we've done everything. Every area is it the lack of leadership that we are seeing in terms of our ministry or in government, or is it the politics of the sector? We know that Telkom has taken the other two giants to court, so that they say, we are minor players, you have no money, let's create equity so that we can ensure greater access to all. I just want to get your wisdom in that. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you. Thanks, Prof. Ngobo. Thank you very much. My leader, Prof. Zide.
Thank you very much, my professor. I'm not going to ask questions to Tawana, but I first want to, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I want to congratulate Tawana, you know, for establishing the Center for the Future of World of Work. I think that is, the UP is probably the first university in South Africa to have done that. And so congratulations, my brother. I think this is the kind of futuristic leadership that we need. And having said that, last year, Prof. Majola asked me to present on this platform. And somehow there's a relationship between the topic that I presented and your topic, because my topic was providing ethical leadership in a disrupted society. So what comes loud and clear in your presentation is not so much about the pandemic and the disruption, but necessarily how higher education sees itself in a disrupted society, and therefore preparing us for the future. And I like the hybrid system, which seems to be taking place, you know, countrywide. Because earlier on, as we all know, the DOL has always been a purview of UNISA. But one of the things which the pandemic has taught us is really to think, outside the box. And as indeed, as Tawana has indicated, you know, we need visionary leaders, and visionary leaders who would look back pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. But my last contribution, Prof. Tawana, is whether or not we, as leaders in higher education, ever thought of learning lessons from the 1918 to 1920 flu pandemic. Because it seems to me, because remember that flu pandemic was caused by the H1N1 virus. And I think for almost every century, there is a pandemic. And I believe that maybe researchers should, as early as now, prepare for what would happen in 100 years to come. Because if we had learned lessons from the 1918 to 1920 flu pandemic, maybe we could have traced, some aspects of what happened then and what the higher education at the time prepared for us for the future world of work, and particularly the transformation of curriculum, as you indicated. And so I think that those are just my comments. Not so much questions, Tawana, but I'm quite excited about your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Prof. Can I just squeeze in? I see Dr. Bongani Nkala. Dr. Nkala, would you like to express yourself? I see that you've got a question.
Thanks, Prof. Majola. Thanks once again for this wonderful platform. I sincerely apologize for being late. I'm not sure whether this has been covered. Prof. Kupe, I think that my challenge here that we have observed a high pass rate in high institutions during the times of COVID, given the fact that our assessments are mostly done online, as much as we are doing the blended approach. I'm at the age of was in the private sector, by the way. So I'm not sure what is your take really on that with respect to whether should we proceed with a online assessment or sit-down examination. My issue is it does affect what we call the pass. The pass rate looks good, but I'm wondering whether we're capturing a good quality. I would say, Prof. Majola, that one lessons that we've learned to COVID, the blended approach. I was looked beginning of last year, our matriculants that started last year and this year as well, they're more tuned with the blended approach in terms of the online learning, which is a great thing. But the assessment part of it, it's where I'm concerned, looking at this high pass rate. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Nkala. Thank you very much. Prof. Kupe, over to you, sir. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, Prof. Kupe has indicated to me and has apologized. It's got this pressing engagement that he has to attend to, obviously the crisis after crisis, as he said earlier on. So, Prof, you let us know when you really have to rush. I know that you did mention my brother that obviously is part of apology as well. We understand we live in that time, I mean in those times, crisis times, but the fact that at least you made great efforts to join us, that is really humbling. Will you respond to these questions and comments? But as I'm saying as well, let us know whenever you have to, when you feel that you really can't take it anymore. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, no, I just called the office now to tell them that I'll be back. We need an urgent meeting about one or two things. You know how these are. The minister made an announcement yesterday and all of that, but it was all good, actually. I'm not complaining. But parents and students want to know, do we come physically? It's almost similar to the question that a colleague just comes here, but assessment, teaching, the question is very simple, actually, it's relevant to this discussion. Will we have contact classes this year? It seems like a clear question, but if you come from KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, it has implications. If you are online, you can stay home. If some classes are going to be hybrid, and more of them will be, perhaps you should actually be getting onto a bus, a train, or into the car to come and join orientation. That's why I'm going back to campus here shortly. But let me answer the questions that have been raised. Thank you, Andre, for the thank you very much, Prof. Zide, for your questions. And you're quite right about the alignment of our questions. And I like the way you characterized what I spoke, and I respect what you said. There were more comments than questions. Andre, I think it's very interesting, the question you asked. In fact, some of what you said was within what Prof. Zide's comments. If you said what investment is missing, the investment that is missing actually is not financial necessarily. There is financial investment that needs to be put into the higher education sector, but that's not what we're talking about here. What investment is lacking is thinking in a visionary way and thinking about universities as part of society, not apart from society, away from the colonial model of the ivory tower. And that is why I was saying that what we need to decolonize our universities in Africa is that, so these are societal institutions whose ultimate success is the impact they have in society. And it cannot be limited to degree granting. Because if you do that, what might happen from the population is that people use the university as an ATM for degrees. And people can get multiple degrees, but they're actually not educated. And to be educated is to be understanding of the contextual realities of your society, and they have to knowledge and skills and know-how using whatever technologies at that point. Technology has evolved. Digital technology is the latest, but technology has always been evolving. The question is, how has it been deployed to address people's material conditions, their social, political, and cultural well-being? And so that is why visionary leadership is very, very important to understand society is evolving, to understand, as Professor Zide referred, this is not the first pandemic to face humanity. There was the Spanish flu 100 years ago. And by the way, more pandemics are coming from what the scientists tell me. But will we be ready? And how have we used knowledge in order to be ready? That is the question. And so I think that then if you return the universities to society, and then a society sees value in the knowledge creation, not knowledge production. Knowledge production is actually imitating. Knowledge creation is something else. It's engaging with your environment to produce something that might be new. So that you don't remain as if scientific discoveries are a business of the North. We don't have any discoveries. If you engage with your societal context and realities and environment, you can produce new knowledge that is relevant to all of humanity. And that's really the challenge. And in relation to the question of assessment, we grapple with this every day. You see, I think fundamentally it's a philosophical problem as well. It's actually not even a technological issue. What is the purpose of assessment? But the purpose of assessment is to measure how much somebody ingested after knowledge or information was poured into their head. The old theory of that people who come to study have something empty. You need to pour something into them, what they call the tabula rasa. But whereas if you think that people actually have a potential to learn and to know, and they know certain things, but you have to provoke their ability to know, what we call at the University of Pretoria, inquiry-led learning. How do you push people to begin to think about things and to think critically, and in that process, co-create relevant knowledge? Then your assessment methods become very, very different. If your assessments are about how much did people imbibe and ingest, then it's easy for people to copy, to plagiarize, and to share information. But if your assessment is rather to test something else, that can't be copied. And so modes of assessment ought to be reimagined and rethought. And also, this is about also, what is the purpose of education? Purpose of education is to tap potential. That potential is turned into knowledge and skills that can be used to transform society. And then that's a whole different ballgame. And then assessment becomes actually, in essence, multiple, multimodal, and different forms. It's not the sit-down exams. When I taught myself, I'd moved away from giving students 3-hour exams. I gave them what we call open book exams. But the way I asked the questions was such that even if they were locked up in the library, they could not answer the question well. They could only answer the question well if they engaged materially and engaged others in debate and discussing, and then they'll be able to answer the question. So those who spend the whole night trying to read and knew failed, simply because they ran out of time as well, practically simply as that possible. So we have to change modes of assessment with an understanding of what graduate attributes and what kind of graduates we want to produce. For me, it's educated, skilled, socially sensitive, engaged, and people who think critically and have a global knowledge, are curious about the world and about society. So I have to run in the next 5 minutes, so but perhaps I should take one more question or comment from Sam Tima.
Yes,
Yes,
of course, yes.
yeah,
Over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Prof. Like everybody else, I'm very inspired by your forward looking. I saw you reading from a script, and I assume that that is a strategic direction that you're taking the university to. And as I was listening to a colleague from India, there is an implied question in his submission to the platform, and that is a design question. And I see there's a new entrant in the delivery of education, and that is the owners of these digital platforms that we are now using to get education. And my question is, what is the model that our universities in South Africa, in particular in Africa, is taking to deliver this education? Because what I see happening, there's a combination approach by these new players who are owning the digital platforms in engagement with the universities. And that means as you transition your delivery, your courses to this platform, you have to repackage them differently, but also take a decision as to who owns what, who manage what role. And I see more and more universities handing over their programs to these providers, but also not only programs, but sometimes deciding that the university will keep the tutoring, or they will want these platforms to bring their own tutors. And sometimes university tutor will do assessment. I think this for me is a very, very strategic decision that needs to be taken. And lastly, if you do it yourself as a university, which means you're moving away from your traditional way of delivering programs, you must have a very strong department that actually designs digitally these courses, but 24/7 oversee the deployment, because the danger is if you don't have a very strong model and platforms that are really monitored by people who know what they are doing, that is going to affect the quality of your educational provision as a university. So it's a very technical but strategic at the same time, a decision on the model. And lastly, what happens to the IP?
No, I think a very good question which we are grappling with now. So, and I think you said something that's very interesting about having your own department. At the University of Pretoria, we have a department called Education Innovation. Now, that is for me, it's one of my most strategic departments, right? Because after all, an educational institution. And also look at, the name is not just a name, Education Innovation. Prof. Zide will tell you is that traditionally what we've had at universities is a department of teaching and learning, or a department of educational technology. Those are the guys that, in a sense, sort of supported, helped lecturers in trying to design their courses and use some technologies and some teaching techniques. And it wasn't really compulsory for everybody to go there. But education innovation, especially at the University of Pretoria, means something else. Is that you must innovate in the space of education, including teaching and learning. And that actually is, technology does not drive education. It is a tool and an enabling platform and a series of applications, in other words, that use, but then you must be conscious what you want to teach, who you want to teach, and for what purposes you want to do. So you're quite right about that, is that where we partner with technology platforms, or even as you imply to tell colleagues, yes, there are companies in the United States would say, give us your course and your course material, we'll package it, and we will sell it for you for a global online audience. In my view and our view is that you mustn't do that. You lose your intellectual property, but also you are selling what has been produced here to someone else, and probably not at the cost at which it was produced. And also you lose the autonomy to be more innovative and to be contextual. Because the tendency for those companies to make everything more generic in order to garner more global audiences. Or if it is specific and highly specialized, to be given to those who can pay more and not those who actually need it, and they don't have the financial means. So you're quite right. We face a very strategic choices that we make here. And the Department of Higher Education and Training has had to ask universities about what is the nature of the partnerships that we're having with these kinds of global providers, and what our role is, because we are public higher education, we're funded by taxpayers' money, so we shouldn't be handing over things to other people who have not actually invested in it. So I'm afraid I got to, Mr. Prof. Majola, I got to run from here, but I'm happy another time to come again and we have this dialogue.
Yeah, so thanks, Prof. Kupe. Thank you so much, my brother. Indeed, most of the people who are here, 90%, I always say 90% are our past speakers and panelists. I always say this platform is very contagious. People who attend will always like to come back, whether to empower us again or just to come and listen. So thank you so much. We are going to release Prof. Kupe, and obviously we will engage him again. He will come back so that he can also inspire us again. We'll try to check with his office when he can come back again. But thank you so much, Prof, and all the best with your meeting. But ladies and gentlemen, just to respect colleagues who have just joined us, because I did say that others were delayed because of load shedding. So we'll continue for a while and then we'll close at some point. But we are all scholars here, we are all leaders here. We can engage each other, we can continue with our conversation. I seen then the chat room, Nimish has been really very busy. I understand Nimish is also from India. Probably if you can just give him some opportunity just to share what is happening there in India, or what do they have. I see Andre also wants to come back, and I also see that Posha had some thoughts there. So I'll give, obviously, Andre, would you like to speak before Nimish, or should we give Nimish a time and then we can come back to you?
Thank you.
Let Andre please.
Thank you so much. Nimish, over to you. I think Nimish is connecting from India.
No, I would prefer if Andre takes the lead and then I can follow suit.
You want Andre first. So Andre, over to you, and then Nimish will come after you. Thank you.
I've got to congratulate Sam on the insight he shared, because clearly he studied the game. And having studied the game, he's seen what the future might offer us. Indeed, our key outcome must be the systemic overhaul of the system, the education system, and how we use the general purpose technologies, whether it be AI, whether it be big data, whether it be IoT, whether it be whatever, until we can properly understand the new governance models required for these linear institutions to go exponential, fundamentally reduce the costs of execution and the efficacy to the outcomes of creating relevant nations that can co-create learning and the evolution of our people to a better life. Until we can properly grapple with the entire framework of we've lost the game. And therefore, Sam, I want to congratulate you for seeing it, because I think in the era for the future of higher education, it's not just an education game. It's not just the teachers. It's not just the assessment. It's not just the platforms. It's not just the content. It's actually understanding all of the technologies, all of the constricting cultures in the governance and ecosystem, and then identifying that exponential gap and creating the systemic overall, institutional overall. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up, sorry, I don't want to disrespect Nimish, just the point you are raising, and somebody was talking about the disruption of the education. It is happening. You see, when we talk education, we're not talking these institutions, we're talking about the products, we're talking about the courses. Right now, as we speak, a lot of people are free to configure their own degrees because of portability of units and modules. So you are losing the structure of so-called campuses. one doesn't need to belong to any university anymore. If I'm able to use this platform to configure my modules to make a degree, and there's one board which says, I don't care where you bring your modules from, as long as you meet this standard, these requirements, I'll give you a degree. So we're going to wake up one day, you're going to find that nobody wants to go to the university, and no university is able to offer full degrees that is to the needs of the people who are the students. And I think we will wake up very much and find ourselves that our university are white elephants because they are not able to participate in this huge market. Because right now people take units and certificates. When you've done certain number of certificates, you actually have a degree. So I think I wanted us to engage Dr. Kupe further, and I think he needs to come back, and we need all the vice chancellors for our universities, especially public universities, because these are huge assets that if they're not going to be flexible, we will have a difficulty of sustaining them and lose the opportunity of portability of education. So that's just basically just to reinforce the point he's raising. I think the disruption is happening, and it's happening at the fast rate that I was going to ask, do we have the capacity and resources to transition? Because if we don't, the government needs to put resources in the space and help those universities that will not have the universities, the resources or the ability to even be able to know what it is that we are dealing with right now. Sorry, just thought I should just clarify where I was going to with Prof before he left, but I'm really wanting him to come back and to share the strategy with us, and that will help a bigger ecosystem of education. Thank you for allowing me to indulge, and thanks, Andre.
Thank you. Thanks.
Sir, allow me to speak, please, now.
And Nimish, yeah, over to you, Nimish. Yeah, you can speak now.
Thank you very much. I think disruption is a bad word. It's about evolution. I mean, I was born in 1970, and my father used to beat me up because I used to play a lot. My mother was a teacher, and to give you a very paradigm of fact, my mother had about close to 200 students that she used to teach to in about 5 classes. The challenge was that after she had delivered a chapter, how does she assess which student is capable of learning a particular chapter or a topic or not? I mean, to give you a very brief example, maybe in 5-10 seconds, if I deliver a chapter and there are, say, 40 students in a class, the moment I take the assessment of that particular chapter, how do I assess how many students understood chapter A or did not understand chapter A or B or C, D? See, the point is, learning in my days when I was about 70s was like you were beaten up. But it was beautiful. Believe me, there was love. Now, today, there's technology. In my days, 62%, 65% was like, wow. Today, 99% is, okay, can you have an education into the Delhi University? So point is, how do we use technology in terms of evolving our students and making them better? Believe me, I was in Africa for about 2.5 years. I've been in India for as long as I've been there. We have to make use of technology to evolve the future generations. That is the key. And if we do not make use of it, believe me, there is so much of competition. I'm sure, sir, guys, gentlemen, you are much, much older than me, maybe. In your times, technology was not so evolved. We were into the era where 50%, 60% marks were good. But today, 90%, 95% marks are nothing. There is so much of competition which is happening. And the idea, and the worst part is the education system is deteriorating so much that it is all about cramming up. Skilling has gone down the drain. How do I make sure that if I have my son or you have your son, how do I make sure that he or she gets the right knowledge and the skills to survive in the years to come? Africa, I believe me, Africa in the next 10 to 15 years will define the economy of the world. The way India is trying to define the economy of the world now, Africa is about 15 years from now. Africa in 15 years, but subject to the condition that we can take the right corrective measures. Education, skilling, assessment. How do I know you are capable? How do I know that you actually fit for that particular industry? Sir, gentlemen, what you said is right. But we've got to think about the future now. That's what the key is all about. And believe me, 15 years from now, Africa will define the next economy of the world, subject to the condition we can take care of the corrective measures. Subject to the condition we can define our economy and our learning and our assessments. It's just not about only one component of a particular pizza. See, the word I chose, pizza, was very deliberate. We have a pizza, we have base, we have cheese, and we have dressings. Africa has everything. I mean, I know I've been there. I'm sorry if I'm trying to be a little more explorative or being more forceful, but believe me, what India is going through, 15 years from now, Africa will have to go through. But we need to find leaders. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nimish. Thank you. Let's hope it may not be even 15 years. Let's hope and let's push it to be lesser than that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nimish, all the way from India. We really appreciate your thoughts. I see a hand there from Dr. Chuma Mangisa, but there's some engagement there from Sanjay Ban. Sanjay, would you like to express yourself there? I see I've got some questions there. And then after Sanjay, then we'll take Dr. Mangisa. Sanjay?
Sure. Thanks, Prof. So, firstly, an observation. I think there's a brilliant amount of initiatives that's currently taking place if one just listens to everything that's been said so far. So in my mind, I like to always get very practical about things. So we're hearing all of these initiatives. My question is, what is the most critical steps we need to take now? In my world, to lead is to do. So what are those steps we need, or things that we need to do now, the top 3 things that we need to do right now to move things forward? I think that's the first, maybe comment or statement. I think the second part is, there's lots of discussions there around, where are we taking education? I love the fact that you're talking about social context and we're talking about, people that are essentially empathetic to the world. I mean, those are very, very important, all the softer skills. So now if one's looking at this going forward, the question in my mind is, I've heard, yes, there are student needs, there are also industry needs, there are business needs, there are entrepreneurial needs. My question is, how are we bringing those parties together to say, guys, there's needs on both ends. Now, how do we close these needs through the existing academia in order to ensure that we upskill our nation and essentially allow them to sustain themselves? I mean, that's literally the gist of it. Thank you.
Sanjay, guys, can I please answer the first question to what Sanjay asked?
Nimish, can you please follow? I will give you the platform to answer. Let me take Dr. Mangisa, and then after Dr. Mangisa, then Nimish will give you the opportunity, my brother, to respond. Thank you very much for that. Dr. Mangisa first.
Thank you very much, Prof. Majola. I wish Professor Kupe was still around, but as we know, he had to rush for other meetings. There has been a sort of a concession that visionary leadership, it is one that is required, that perhaps will be able to take the future of education in this country going forward in the manner it is supposed to be. But here is my concern, you know, that makes me to believe perhaps that there is lack thereof, you know, of visionary, you know, leaders, you know, from our government space. And these are my concerns, Prof. Mazwe and other delegates. If you are looking at the fiscus, you know, right now, the fiscus is bloated. It is getting bloated, more and more bloated as we speak. On the other side, basic education department is producing more university entrants. I'm saying fiscus is getting more bloated. Basic education department is producing more, you know, university entrants. If fiscus is getting more bloated, it therefore means university grants from government are going to be decreasing as we go to the future. Now, there is a pandemonium which is being created here that to me, I am becoming concerned whether there is visionary leadership, because as more of these matriculates are being produced for entry into universities, while we don't have money as government, while government grants are getting depleted, how universities, visionary, especially the public universities, how are they imagining sustaining themselves, addressing, you know, the future needs of this country from an education perspective? Anybody can engage, but that's the concern, you know, that I have where I'm sitting. Thanks, Prof. Majola.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Mangesa. Before I give Nimish the opportunity to say something, by the way, the question by or the request by Dr. Bongani Nkala that if you can get other vice-chancellors as well. Fortunately, next week on Wednesday, we'll be hosting Professor Chilidzi Marwala from the University of Johannesburg. So he will be here next week, Wednesday. We'll be engaging him. He has been here before, actually many times he's across this platform, and he loves coming back here. So yeah, just to answer you, Dr. Bongani, before I forget on your question, that will be next week, Wednesday. Dr. Marwala will be here. And then Nimish, yes, sir, my brother. Nimish, now you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think the biggest component of the entire survival and growth is trust. We have to give each other some time and understand what we believe in. Andre has been a phenomenal partner, and we've realized that the idea to grow in economies is only not economic, but social as well. And somewhere we've come to a conclusion where we believe that it's time that we contribute to the social welfare of the economy. And that's where I think we are in sync, and everybody needs to be in sync. It's just not you and me or anybody else. Unless we think about growth for the masses and the welfare, things will not work out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Nimish. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is anyone want to say anything, I think now probably we may. I can see the hand there from Andre. Is there anyone who wants to maybe raise another point before we close? I think now we can come to a time where we can close our session. So I'll give the opportunity to Andre, and then we'll see if there is anyone else. Otherwise, we will close the session. Over to you, Andre.
Thank you, Mazwe. 2 weeks ago, I sat in a Zoom workshop on citizen leadership, where the esteemed Dr. Rual Khoza, reminded us that seeing the dignity of the people around us is a key first start to what we do. You know, Sam said something interesting earlier that makes this point, that how we bring the dignity to the people of our country using higher education, and all in the education value chain, is where we must bring leadership. I honestly know that if we do not get back to cooperation, and I mean cooperation at a level of maturity that is where we were in '94, unless we bring the flexibility to respect at the deepest level the differences between who we are and the differences between where we are now and the future, we will fail. And I want to congratulate you, Mazwe, for bringing us together on this topic, because we certainly need leadership. But leadership is to foster this cooperation and this flexibility, but this deep insight into what the future must be. And I thank you for bringing me here tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, Andre. Ladies and gentlemen, I think probably if we can, I don't see any hands, so I'm not closing for anyone. We had a wonderful engagement. We have a wonderful conversation, ladies and gentlemen. Really, Professor Kupe has challenged us, has moved us, and then we obviously definitely will try to get him back in the very near future. We've got a lineup that is, I mean, obviously in the next coming few weeks, months, but we'll try to make sure that he comes back. And thank you so much for joining us, each and every one of you, wherever you've come from. Thank you so much. And as I said, I know that really we're very disrupted today in this disrupted era by the load shedding. But all of you who made it, thank you so much. It was a wonderful engagement and conversation. We've learned a lot. There's so many questions you've raised, and it's very important to revisit this discussion or this topic again, so that we may do justice to it. Those who joined us for the first time, please do join us again next week. We meet every Wednesdays at 6 p.m. I'm sure now you understand why we keep on coming every week, or these esteemed leaders and scholars keep on coming every Wednesdays at 6 p.m. because we learn a lot from each other. We always say leadership, it's a journey. Leadership, it's about learning. So we come here, we learn a lot. As I'm saying, next week, we'll be hosting Professor Majola from the University of Johannesburg. Please do join us again. But also, you may join our Facebook page. It's called Leadership Think Tank. If you go to Facebook, and then you'll find us there. The page is called Leadership Think Tank. It's where you will find us, and then really it's where we engage each other on any leadership issues, and we are more than welcome to also post any leadership topics or any leadership issues that you want to engage on. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We will meet again next week, Wednesday, as I'm saying that we meet every Wednesdays. Otherwise, this session is adjourned now. May God bless you and thank you so much for joining us. Till we meet again next week, Wednesday. Thank you. God bless you and goodbye.